Hello and welcome back to London Cycle Routes. Today I'll be showing you how to cycle from Clapham Junction in South London to Hammersmith in West London. This ride takes under half an hour and you can do the whole thing on quiet streets and protected cycle lanes. By public transport, the same journey takes over 40 minutes and requires a change of train or bus. So this is a really useful route that can save you time, especially if you're coming into London by train. If you find this video useful, or you just enjoy watching it, then please don't forget to hit the bell icon and subscribe to the channel on YouTube, as I try to post new videos just like it every week. I'd also like to say a big thank you to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. If you'd like to contribute as well, you can find a link in the description below the video. Alright, let's get going. We're starting outside the northern exit to Clapham Junction station on Grant Road. This street is usually pretty quiet, but it's often used for pick up and drop off for people going to the station, so do keep an eye out for cars going back and forth. Just a quick note as well that if you want to do this route by cycle hire, perhaps you're arriving by train, there's a rank of bikes a little bit further up Grant Road in the direction we were going. For now, we're going to turn into this estate and use this ramp. You can see that there's a cycle symbol, so this is a designated route, and we're going to head onto Thomas Baines Road. I find the modernist buildings on this street really quite interesting, and if you look to your right, you'll see that some of them are connected to each other by a series of pedestrian walkways, which I find kind of cool. You don't have to worry about traffic on this street, as it's closed off to cars at the end and so doesn't have a through route, and we're going to go through here now. Wait at the Toucan crossing and press the button, and you'll find yourself on the other side of the street with a little slightly damaged looking cycle track which leads on to Maysoul Road. Unfortunately, this street has a bit of a problem with pavement parking, and as you can see, lots of cars are parked up on the side of the road, really narrowing the carriageway and making it quite difficult for vehicles to pass each other, as we see here. The amazing thing about there being so many cars parked here is that there are car parks on either side of the road as well, and also garages for the estates, so it would be nice to see this tidied up a little bit. At the end of Winter Street, we run down a path which runs along the side of the railway running into Clapham Junction. It's actually the Reading to Waterloo line here. We then turn left immediately underneath the railway, and if you're a long time viewer of this channel, you'll see that this has actually been redone since we last came here. I think it looks quite nice compared to what was here before. Turn right onto Nantes Close, and notice that both Nantes and Tours Passage, which we were both on, are both names of French cities. I think it's always nice to notice a little bit of a theme to the names of streets as you go past. Now, as we come to the end of this street, which is close to traffic, so very quiet, bear right and onto the cycle path here. And although this is a dedicated path for cycles, do be forgiving of anyone walking or wheeling up it, as it's also the only accessible way up. The other way is actually a flight of steps, as I discovered the other day when I came here with a pram. We're now on a really nice protected cycle path, and don't be fooled, CS8, the route which we're briefly on, is not all like this, although I wish it was. But we're going to come off it and we're going to use this Toucan crossing. You can see it has a cycle symbol, so you're allowed to go across. Unfortunately, it's a two-stage crossing, and that means you have to wait twice, although the timings weren't too bad for us when I came here. Notice here the second water leak of our short bike rides here. This water's all been flowing down for a few weeks as well, and slowly flooding the underpass, which is incidentally an underpass which starred in the film Clockwork Orange. This next section, you've got the option of either cycling on a not very good pavement cycle track or using the bus lane. I'm happy to use the bus lane here, as remember that when the pedestrian light's green, it'll be red for cars, so you'll get a bit of a head start. You're actually supposed to enter the cycle lane a little bit further on than I did, but you probably saw that those red and white barriers had blown over and were blocking the entrance, so I had to go on a little bit earlier. Hopefully that'll be fixed when you come down here. There are cycle lanes on the pavement in both directions on this bridge. Unfortunately, they're not very good, and it would be a lot better to use the space that is dedicated to both of them to build something a bit higher quality, maybe a two-way track on this side of the bridge. Now, at the end of the bridge, we're going to turn left here. If you're doing this route in the opposite direction, you'll probably notice that there isn't a crossing to get to the other side, so it might be worth dismounting there if you're not confident and crossing the road on foot, so you can get to the cycle lane on the other side of the bridge. Needless to say that at the other end of the bridge, in the opposite direction, you have one fewer road to cross. This street is quite quiet today, but You may run into some industrial and construction traffic accessing this site on the left, which is actually for the Thames Tideway Tunnel, the new super sewer, which is also responsible for the diversion on Cycleway 3 on the embankment a lot further east of here. So it is worth keeping an eye out for trucks and lorries. When you've passed the construction site though, things should improve significantly. The next few minutes will be on streets in Hammersmith and Fulham's new South Fulham Street West clean air neighbourhood. That sounds like a mouthful. It's basically a sort of low traffic neighbourhood with traffic filters, with one big difference, which is essentially that residents of Hammersmith and Fulham are exempt from the filters, which are all camera enforced filters, and can drive through them. There's one just here. You can see on the left these signs that say no entry except for permit holders. Now, whether traffic levels will be truly low enough for comfortable cycling with such sweeping exemptions remains to be seen. It's obviously very, very quiet today, but I did come here on New Year's Day morning, so it is pretty quiet everywhere. So this shouldn't be taken as necessarily indicative of how it will be when you get here if you're coming at, say, rush hour, although it certainly is a promising start. Certainly, I think it's likely that traffic levels will be lower thanks to the scheme, and that's good and should be welcomed. However, I do agree with criticism of the resident exemptions. I think it's arguably unfair to treat different cars differently depending on where they're registered. Also, it's unlikely to reduce traffic to the levels of a true low traffic neighbourhood, partly because it won't discourage locals from making short trips by cars, which is really one of the main benefits of schemes like that. It actually encourages modal shift, so people, instead of driving a journey, will find it more inconvenient and instead walk or cycle it, and they'll be able to do that because traffic levels are lower. It's a virtuous circle, a carrot and a stick. In the case of this scheme and other ones around Hammersmith and Fulham with the residence exemptions, it's really only a stick for out-of-town motorists. It stops rat running by drivers passing through the area, but it doesn't really do anything to discourage short trips by car in the area. If every borough took an approach like this with residence exemptions, I think it would actually be chaos, and it wouldn't really be obvious to motorists what they could and couldn't do, because nobody really knows what borough they're in at any given time. On the positive side though, Hammersmith and Fulham thinks that these schemes are politically an easier sell to its residents, and it's using that political headroom to roll the schemes out at pace, and it has plans to cover the entire borough essentially within the next year or so, which would actually be quite significant. And from our perspective anyway, this route is definitely the best way to go, however the schemes perform, and hopefully they'll perform well. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, as we pass under Putney Bridge, make sure you mind your head here. I'm quite tall and I didn't have any problems, but my bike has quite a forward riding position, so I could definitely see someone on like a Dutch style bike maybe having problems through that tunnel, so do watch the ceiling. We're now going through Bishop's Park, and this path here unfortunately has little mini speed bumps on it, which are quite dangerous, so do watch out as you go over them. You can see one just here. Unfortunately, Bishop's Park does close at night, but the opening hours are not as bad as some other parks, and I think it's time to close at 8:30 p.m, which for most commutes should be enough time for people to get home. If you do need to route around the park at night after it's closed, then your other option is Fulham Palace Road, which unfortunately isn't a particularly nice road to cycle on, although at least because you'll be riding it late at night, you will have missed rush hour, so hopefully it should be a little bit better. For this route that we're on now, going through the park, if you need to remember the way to go, just go via the cafe, which is here on your right, and also past the toilet blocks, which is next there. And we're going to exit onto Stevenage Road at the first opportunity we have. Stevenage Road, as we will see in a second, is extremely quiet and really nice, and that's because of a historic traffic scheme which limited through traffic around Fulham Riverside. It's interesting because we are still in Hammersmith and Fulham's council area, but this historic scheme does not have residence exemptions and uses physical road closures like bollards in order to stop rat running. As a result, the streets around here, including outside Fulham FC's ground Craven Cottage, which we're passing right now, are absolutely lovely to cycle on, and it's really common to see people just walking in the street or cycling down here, or even letting their kid ride a scooter, as we just saw. Whether or not that will be the case on the new schemes with residence exemptions remains to be seen. And I suppose rhetorically you could ask, would you retroactively apply residence exemptions to this scheme, which is working really well? I think the answer to that is a resounding no, although I'm slightly scared of asking, as I do worry that the council's answer might be yes, just to make a point. I've heard some suggestions that the residence exemption schemes could be upgraded to full schemes like this with the benefit of time once people got used to them, but to be honest, I don't really see how the politics of that works, because one of the driving forces behind introducing low traffic neighbourhoods is to tackle rat running, and local residents can be persuaded of their merits on that basis. However, I don't really see where the support necessarily comes from for making that move and getting rid of a residence exemption when the only people affected would be the local residents, who are the ones that vote for the council. So it's difficult to see how Hammersmith and Fulham would actually be able to get itself away from the residence exemption system further down the line. I suppose we'll just have to see what happens. Now, this route through Fulham Riverside is really great, and the streets around here are all nicely filtered. As long as you're heading in this general direction, you don't really have to stick to the exact streets that I've gone on. In fact, I think I actually went on a slightly different route than I planned to, but it was fine. If you'd rather stick to a signposted route though, there are some blue signs and cycle symbols pointing the way that we're going. That's the remnants of an old London cycle network route. Although, unfortunately, the signage is not brilliant and quite easy to miss at points. If you'd like a map of the route, you can download one in the link in the description. It goes to a website called Komoot, and you can also download a GPX file there, which you can use on whatever app or device of your choice. It's a standard format. And while you're looking down there, if you're enjoying the video, make sure you hit subscribe and the bell icon so you're alerted for new videos as I post them. I try to post new videos, just like this one, every week, although occasionally life gets in the way. And if you really like what we're doing on the channel, you could always consider contributing on the Patreon. Thanks very much to everyone who does so. I really appreciate it, and it's extremely kind of you. There's a link to it in the description for anybody who'd like to join it. By the way, you might notice the name of the new residential development on the left there. It's called Fulham Reach, which seems like an appropriate name as it is a bit of a reach to claim that it is in Fulham. We are very much approaching Hammersmith now. And on Crisp Street here, we have a nice little protected cycle lane with some pleasant looking trees there in the curb. In the opposite direction, you just cycle on the main carriageway, but these streets are all filtered around here, so there really isn't very much traffic. At the end of here, we turn left and we're going to head on to the Riverside, and that's Hammersmith Bridge that you can see in the background. It's a very attractive looking bridge. Unfortunately, it is currently closed, although it will soon reopen to pedestrian and cycle traffic. You can currently walk over it, and you can also push a bike, but you will soon be able to ride over it, and that will open us up some nice new routes, which I'm going to show off in the channel. By the way, this section of riverfront that we were on is shared with pedestrians, so do make sure you're courteous and give way to anybody who's walking. I know that people don't really like shared sections, and I'm kind of with you on that, so fortunately we weren't on it for too long, and we've turned up Digby Mansions, which has turned into Bridge View, and we're going to use this crossing underneath the A4 and the Hammersmith flyover. These are actually two separate lights, and they can be red and green at different times, so do make sure that you're not going across the road when it's red, as that could be quite dangerous. However, in my experience, they are timed to go green at roughly the same time, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Now we're coming onto King Street, which is in the centre of Hammersmith. You could turn right there down this path to go to the Hammersmith Gyratory, but we're actually going to turn left, and we're going to go deep into the middle of King Street, and we're going to end right in front of Hammersmith and Fulham Council building, which is slightly appropriate as I have been talking about them quite a bit during this video. It's on the left there, and you can see it has an EU flag, a UK flag and a Ukrainian flag up there at the moment. So that's it. Thanks very much, guys. I hope you'll agree that that is a great route. It's really direct looking there, apart from the kink, which is unfortunately due to the Hurlingham Club, which means you have to go around this big private members club on the end of the Thames. If you've got any ideas for routes, let me know in the comments. I'd also love to know what you think, particularly about the clean air neighbourhood. It's an interesting policy. It's a bit different from other boroughs. Don't forget to hit subscribe, like the video, and if you really like what we're doing, you can always contribute on the Patreon as well. Thanks very much, and see you again next time.